Now, President Cyril Ramaphosa has again condemned gender-based violence. In his weekly letter, he says the three key bills have been introduced in Parliament in an effort to address the problem. The Criminal Law Act will now include sexual intimidation and will broaden the offence of incest. It will also step up the duties of those who suspect a sexual offence has been committed against a child to report the matter. The scope of the National Register of Sex Offenders has been expanded to include the details of all sex offenders, and it will now be made available to the public. To expand on this, we're joined by Zintle Olayi, National Steering Committee of Total Shutdown. Zintle, a very good morning to you. Some strides have been made by President Cyril Ramaphosa as we continue to witness the scourge of gender-based violence and the impact that it has on people's day-to-day lives. What do you make of the President's move?
I think that it's a move in the right direction. However, I feel like the Act has a lot of loopholes. And when I say loopholes, I mean that it's not very clear on how governmental departments of officials will be held accountable if they choose or they do not follow or adhere to the rules or the regulations that are set forth in the Act. I feel like a lot of work has been done so far, and we're moving towards the right direction in terms of ending the scourge of gender-based violence. However, there's a lot more work to be done, and when I say work, I mean implementation in terms of what we need to see happen to eradicate this pandemic in South Africa.
As you mentioned the loopholes and you speak about how it can be improved and what you see to be some of the points that stick out, what are the biggest challenges when it comes to moving these laws into the right direction, especially as we have seen them being proposed and no thorough movement or perhaps strict time frames put in place to make them effective?
I would say that the biggest challenges and the biggest loopholes that I see within this act or within this bill speaks to especially let's for example look at civil society and the work that civil society organizations do on a daily basis to ensure that there are services that are available for victims and survivors of gender-based violence. The act does not. The act puts the burden instead on these civil society organizations instead of putting them on the perpetrators and the governmental organizations that should be responsible in upholding and adhering to these new changes, to these laws.
The President in his weekly letter said that the sad reality is that many survivors of gender-based violence have in fact lost faith in the criminal justice system. With these three bills and the manner in which they packaged and some of the areas that they point to, like ensuring that the gaps that allow some perpetrators to evade crimes are brought to book, with things like that put in place to move this matter forward and ensure that people are held accountable, what would you say the bill symbolizes in the stride to fight gender-based violence?
I would say that the bill is all talk for now. Until it's implemented, and these things are things that we can see that are tangible. For example, if we speak to victims secondary victimization and people who have the strength to actually open cases and go to the police station, and how they are treated by police officials. In one of the demands that we asked for as the Total Shutdown was to sensitize police officials in terms of how to deal with victims and survivors of gender-based violence. And if you look at that bill, you'll see that the loopholes that I'm speaking to are the loopholes where there's no systems. There are no systems of accountability that I see clearly within these bills that will hold these officials accountable if they do not adhere to these regulations that have been set in place.
Some of the proposals on the bill speaks to the expansion of the scope of the National Register for Sex Offenders to include the particulars of all sex offenders. And what do you make of this inclusion, especially as we have seen perhaps a few years ago witness the impact of a sexual predator at a primary school which really destroyed many lives?
I feel that the sexual registers, the sexual registry should be made national, and everyone in society should be allowed to view and see who exactly is a sexual offender, so that we are better equipped to protect ourselves. Because what I've seen is that as women and as children and as people who are gender non-conforming in South Africa, we cannot rely on the law to protect us from perpetrators, as the law sometimes are the very same people who subject us to secondary victimization in terms of gender-based violence. I want to speak to the case now, for example, that is happening currently of Yolanda Kyankis, who's been expelled from higher learning education by the Rhodes, by Rhodes University, who was part of the protest which was hashtag the RU reference list. She's been expelled and she is facing criminal. She's being prosecuted by the law, instead of the law protecting her from these crimes that are being inflicted on her by the Rhodes University.
There for now, the National Steering Committee of Total Shutdown, Zintle Olayi, speaking to some of the 3 key bills introduced to fight gender-based violence by President Cyril Ramaphosa, saying there are a number of loopholes, and for now it's all talk until these bills have been implemented into society.